Welcome. First of all, thank you to everybody for coming. This is the first one. Hello, sir.
Neil.
Do you want to grab a quick brew? We're just starting this very moment.
No, I'm all right.
Anyway, come and grab a seat. This is nice. This is nice to see numbers. Often, I mean, this is the first one Jen and I have done since before we went away to South Africa, wasn't it? Which was June. And usually after we've had a spell away, then people often, it just kind of collapses. I mean, when we first had this within the first year, we would get like 25, 30, 40 odd people. It was a really beautiful thing. But then when I started traveling with this work and I couldn't commit to it, everybody kind of just dissipated. And so it's nice to have these numbers. So first of all, thank you everybody for coming, because if people don't come, it just really isn't worth putting on. But we really feel like the message that we have to share is so valuable. So valuable. Just going to turn that tipping. So thank you to everybody who's here, and thank you to everybody online. Who have we got in the house? We've got Rach from South Africa, and we've got Emma from Devon, Wiltshire, where down south.
And Steph from Canada.
Steph from Canada, beautiful. And I know that people here have got some air miles behind us. We've got Gav here from South Africa.
Okay, just for this hour.
Just for this. It's 2 hours, Gav. It's 2 hours. It's worth it. And then I know there's people that have travelled up from Lancashire. So thank you, everybody. And some who've come all the way from Kendal. So thank you. First of all, thank you so much for coming.
I just wondered, is this new is there people that haven't heard about this before?
Brilliant. We love this people. We love you people. And everybody online is, you're well and truly introduced. So that's brilliant.
I just wondered, for the newer people, was there anything in particular in the title that you heard, or have you kind of been dragged along by friends or family? Or
well, Edward
Cool. Cool. To me, it is a really nice thing to do. To me, this has been the most valuable thing I ever got to understand I knew nothing about, ultimately. But to me, this is perhaps the most valuable message for humanity. And that sounds like a really kind of big statement, possibly an arrogant statement. I don't mean it to come across as an arrogant statement, genuinely. I really don't, but I genuinely do believe that this is perhaps the most simple message that for humanity at the moment, for any time. What we'll be talking about isn't something new. This isn't something that's kind of a new idea. This isn't like a therapy or a counselling or a technique. There's nothing to do with this. When I came across it, I was told, you don't have to do anything with this, Dave. And I'm like, cool, I'm lazy, so I am more than happy not to do anything. And if anybody says you don't have to do anything and suddenly you're going to start to find yourself getting better, I'm down with that. I used to go and see therapists and they give me all these things to do and, rethink like this and think like that. All of a sudden I got introduced to something that went right before all that. It went right before all those things, those ideas, those concepts, the list of to-dos, what we need to do. It went right before all that to the foundation. And to me, what was kind of revealed for me was the foundation of the nature of reality. Which again is no small thing. It's sounds like a very complex conversation. It sounds like we'll be going into all kinds of deep things. But what I loved most about this was its absolute simplicity. The simplicity. How simple life actually is. How beautiful it is. How genuinely beautiful life truly is. I had no awareness of, some people may get scared as I say the S word, of what you could call spiritual. I had no concept of that before waking up to the realization that spiritual is every single moment. It's this right here, right now. Everything that we are looking for is completely and utterly us in this absolute moment. Everything that we think we need is within us right in this very moment. We're not what we think we are. We're not limited. We're not victims of life. We as human beings just live in massive misunderstanding. And it's extremely innocent misunderstanding. As we will explain over this next couple of hours, we will start to explain how we have found, and insights that we have realized, how we have found how starting to understand the simplicity is the most powerful thing anybody can ever realize. Jen and I, we've been recently working with people out in South Africa, and we got to meet all kinds of people. We got to meet exceptionally wealthy people with housemaids, swimming pools, big cars, who are exceptionally unhappy, who suffer a great deal. These people from the outside look like they have everything. They had faith. They had religious faith. From the outside, you would look at these people and think, you've got everything you need to be happy, yet within this community, there was so much unhappiness, mental dis-ease, and suffering. And then we got the absolute privilege of being invited to go and talk at a charity, which was perhaps the most challenging thing my ego had come up against for working with people. And this was working with physically injured African refugees. So these were refugees from places like Congo and Ivory Coast, and they had suffered such horrific abuse at the hands of other human beings, like petrol bombed, seen their families killed, watched their families being raped, had limbs amputated. Some of them were in wheelchairs. And you would look at these people and go, well, you have everything you need in order to be totally dissatisfied with life and in absolute agony. Yet that wasn't what we came across. So you start to get a sense when you kind of start getting involved with this kind of conversation, you start getting involved with this line of work, you start to come across people and you start to really see how much we think we need in our life to be peaceful and happy people. And how much of an illusion that actually is. How much of a falsehood it truly is. So over this next couple of hours, we will explain some principles that we came across. And these are principles. Many people talk about principles, but these are actual principles. And when we're talking about principles, we're talking about the things that apply to everybody, who there are absolutely no exemptions to. So it's not that this conversation only applies to a minority of people or perhaps a majority of people. This conversation applies to everybody. There is nobody outside of these principles. These principles were realized by a man named Sydney Banks, who was a welder, who had no qualifications. ninth grade, I think he was, when he left school. But he realized something so deep about psychology, spirituality. He realized it's both the same thing. And he realized that there were foundational principles to the reality that each and every one of us experiences as individuals. And as he started to speak about these principles to other people, he noticed, because himself, through his own insight, he found himself find peace and contentment. And he was a man who suffered a great deal in life. But he suddenly realized that peace and contentment are not in the world, they're not in the future, they're not in the past. But they are actually exactly what we are already. And this is something that I myself had the privilege to realize. And throughout, over time, as I calmed down with my evangelical, I've found something absolutely amazing, you all need to hear it, towards my family started to hear it. And my family have had insight. And my family has gone from one that used to argue an awful lot, and we used to drink an awful lot and do all kinds of stupid things and fight, and to one that is a very peaceful family, where alcohol isn't what we turn to anymore, and our lives are just very different. My sister found freedom from eating disorders and you could call it an exercise disorder. She used to exercise all the time, and now she just exercises for fun as opposed to control of weight or to get somewhere. She does what she does when she wants to do it, and she loves it. And this is all through simply listening to the nature of reality, the nature of life, what life is as opposed to what life isn't. We'll be talking about how we live in such an illusion, how the reality that we live in is an illusion, a very convincing illusion. It is a mind-blowing happening. It is simply a mind-blowing happening. I cannot comprehend it. To this day, in all my work and talking about this and realizing stuff about this, the more I realize about this, the more I realize I can never get to the end of this. We're talking about principles that don't exist in the realm of the physical. We're talking about principles that exist in the realm of the spiritual, if you want to call it spiritual. If you don't want to call it spiritual, say you were a scientist who was opposed to the spiritual nature of life, we would speak to you and say, we're talking about principles that are in the realm of the formless. They're not bound by matter. They're not physical. These are ethereal. They are energetic. They're nothing. But they're everything. So I'll just mention the principles. So these principles, I mean,
I was just going to say,
yeah.
it's this isn't in any way like religious, but it's not. People who are religious can embrace this. Like it's beyond anyone's beliefs or ideas. It's not to replace anything. We're not here to convince you of anything. It's a really neutral understanding, which I think is why I really liked it, because it wasn't telling me to believe something else. It wasn't a practice. It wasn't a technique. It was something, as you were talking about, principles like foundational, fundamental, and it's something that really unites us rather than divides us. And I think there's so much beauty in different ways and beliefs in the world, but often it can cause division rather than bringing us together. So I think I've loved this, because when we go to the conference in London, there's people of all faiths, people of no faith, all in one room learning about something that's fundamental. So this isn't about us replacing your beliefs or getting you to follow anything. It's a description of how life works. And as we start to see that, it seems there is more ease, less stress, all the things we kind of want in life. And I think the stuff we've been doing in South Africa, again, it keeps showing you that we believe that we are victims of our past or circumstance, and we're bound by that in some way. And this really points to the fact that it isn't so. That change is possible for anyone in any moment, regardless of circumstance or the past. And I think we've been led to believe we're a product of past, product of circumstance. And I think I love the hopeful message of this, and how this is going out into different countries in different ways. It's going into education, it's in the prison systems. And I think we've been taught mental illness and dis-ease, and I think this is about our mental health and what's our birthright. It's what we're born with, and in some ways it's a learning of subtraction. Like, we're not adding stuff to you, it's like taking away what isn't true. And when that falls off, we're left with what is true. And I think we as human beings can intuit that, and we hear it in different ways. And yeah, I think this is the most kind of uniting conversation. And the nicest thing is, at the end of working with the refugees, the guy who runs the centre, refugee himself, disabled, said this is going to be what changes South Africa. And we said, oh, do you think it's that simple? And he just said, I don't think it's that complicated. Because what he saw, he realised, was what was going to bring people together. And I think that's something that South Africa's been wanting for a really long time. And then he said in the last time we saw him, not just South Africa, this is like a global thing. Yeah. He's really excited.
And I also think, as much as it unites, it highlights what is this separation. What is the separation? When we've been in South Africa and been working with these people, we do see massive divide. And things have come on a long way. They really, really have. But there is still a massive divide. And it really shines a highlight on, it really highlights the simplicity of the solution. The simplicity of a solution, because the solution's really simple. People throw money at it. People throw housing. People throw this, people throw that, people throw jobs, we keep on throwing things in the world. But the world cannot change until our minds change. And when we were working, we weren't working at this point, we went to visit a soup kitchen with 300 homeless people. Our friend came away saying, the problem's too big, it's too big a problem. Where both Jen and I were, after having conversations with some of these people at this soup kitchen, this homeless soup kitchen, we were like, no, the solution's really simple. The solution's really simple. People just need to change their minds. People just need to think differently. And I think the potential for that on a global scale exists, but on an individual scale, it's the most powerful thing to realize is the nature of experience. So these principles were, it's called 3 principles, what we shared. My sister's always really gutted that it actually has a name. She's saying it shouldn't have a name. I'm like, yeah, but we communicate in language, so at least it's going to have to have a name. And it's talking about 3 principles. So 3 principles is probably the most simple thing to call it. It used to be, it's been called innate health. In fact, in some places it still is called innate health. It's been called psychology of mind. What's it called? Health realization, which is where, I think that's another beautiful descriptive term for it, where people literally realize they're mentally healthy. People who have struggled for years and been in a system which is teaching mental illness, and I mean that with the greatest of respect, because some of the people who tried to help me were some of the most beautiful people I've ever met. But I was never informed that I was actually mentally healthy. Nobody told me that. People told me I would have depression for the rest of my life. I'd find ways to cope with it. That my chemical imbalances would always play a part in my life. But I fairly quickly, after being with those people, came across this and realized that's absolute nonsense. It is not true. It simply isn't true. Everybody is mentally healthy. We just don't know it. So these three principles that we're talking about are the words that people have heard before. Okay. Mind. Everybody's heard of the word mind. Now, when we're talking about mind, we're not talking about your mind, 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 my mind. We're not talking about our mind. We're talking about something bigger. When we're talking about mind, we're talking about a universal mind. A universal mind. Universal meaning all-encompassing. An all-encompassing mind. An intelligence. An intelligence that exists behind this universe. Here we go. This can sound like a really out there concept, but I just want people just for one moment just to consider it. Just for one moment, just consider the complexity of this universe, or even closer to home. Simply consider the complexity of our organism. Us. The organism of the human being, for example. Human beings did not create humanity. Humanity did not create human beings, but we exist. But human beings are not an idea of humanity. We are an idea of this universe, along with the trees, the insects, the fish, all the other mammals, bacteria, the fungus, seas, suns, moons, galaxies, whatever other life is out there. Everything is a product of the universe. There is nothing in this universe that is not a product of the universe. Everything is a manifestation of this universe, and we are part of that. When you look at our physiology, the amazing ability within this one body to cut and heal, to have an immune system that will fight off disease. These are all beautiful things that we never invented. Yet we're born with them. This is no small thing. This is a beautiful thing. The way our organs work, our optical organs, the eyes, to take in light and create an image within our mind that looks like it's out there. The way the eardrum works to take a sound wave and turn it into an experience of noise, sound, that only exists within our mind, within our brain, within our mind, within our being. We're built so that we can take in nutrients and turn it into energy and utilize it to walk around on earth and live a life. When we're talking about mind, we're talking about an intelligence. Hiya, Charlotte. What are you doing? Welcome. When we're talking about mind, we're talking about a universal mind. The intelligence behind all intelligence. The intelligence behind the entire universe. Everything is it. Everything, whether it is a physical manifestation such as a planet or an organism or a being or a sun, or whether it is the potential energy behind it, it's all the same thing. It's this energy that manifests itself into being. And it creates all. There is no exceptions. And this has been known about for millennia. And people have called it all kinds of names. Religions are created around it. This mind, this intelligence that unifies all things, this one happening, this one energetic happening that takes place in an infinite amount of ways, is what people have called God. In quantum physics, they call it the quantum field. We have got religion and science kind of lining up alongside each other on train tracks now, both heading in the same direction, but they never cross because science doesn't like the word God and religion doesn't like the word quantum field or whatever else they wish to call it. But we're basically biting up the same tree. Consciousness. Consciousness. This awareness of our life. This awareness that gets to experience life. Whatever it shows up as, whether it be depression, whether it be hell, or whether it be enlightening heaven. We experience via consciousness. There is nobody in this room who is not sat in consciousness. There is nobody on the planet who these principles don't apply to. Consciousness literally pervades the entire natural world. It's also born of the same place as we're born. Consciousness is a happening that we cannot explain. There's lots of argument about consciousness. But consciousness is this awareness. We can argue about its source, but we cannot argue about the fact of it. It's here right now. We're sat in it. It's a fact, it's a truth. We are conscious beings. And the third principle, the power of thought. Again, another universal principle. We all have the ability to think. We are all sat and born in this power that we call thought. This thing that you cannot find in a brain. We can study the effects of thought on the brain, but we can never find the actual thing, yet we experience it all the time. I recently stopped doing tree work when I realized that these principles apply to trees. And I realized that these principles create the reality that we perceive. These principles create the way that the world looks to us. These principles create the way that we look to ourselves. These principles create the way that people look to us. Finance, relationships, homes, future, the past. These are all created because of these principles. You take any of these principles away, there's nothing. There's nothing. But these principles are all one thing. And they are a happening of what we call our mind. Now, when we talk about our mind, we're talking about thought. What we call our mind is actually a load of thought in the consciousness that we are. So as we start to get insight into these, also I was going to say the tree thing. When I realized that the trees are aware. When I've cut them, they've healed. They've also, if I've taken, say, 30 years worth of growth off, it does not take the tree 30 years to get back to that state. It will do it within 6 or 7 years, maybe 8, 10 years, very quickly. This awareness, this consciousness applies as much to a human being as it does a tree, as much to a tree as it does to an insect. This consciousness is consciousness. And trees communicate. They send messages to one another. They react. They never grow into each other, or very rarely do you find trees growing into each other. You walk through a woodland and look up, you'll see that the canopies don't touch. They are aware of other. They are aware of self. To be aware of self is to be aware of other. To be aware of others, to be aware of self. They don't grow amongst each other. So these principles apply to all life. We're human beings. I'm talking to human beings, so we'll keep this on a fairly human level. But when we're talking about thought, what we often think about thought is, we think about, when I'm talking about thought, we often think about this thought, that thought, good thought, right thought, wrong thought, bad thought, blah, 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 blah. This thought, you know, your thought, my thought, right thought. We go on. And what I'm going to propose is that these are like waves. Okay, each thought is like a wave. Good thought, bad thought, right thought, immoral thought, whatever thought. Angry thought. But what I'm going to propose is that those are like waves. And we're not talking about the waves. Okay? Waves are a consequence of water. We're talking about the lake. All thought. All thought. All thought that we have previously experienced and the thought that we haven't yet experienced. We're talking about the power of thought. The fact of it. The fact that we have this ability to create using the power of thought. Everything we see in here started with a thought. We figured it out using thought. We implemented it using thought. We built it using thought. We sit here and experience it via thought. So we're talking about creative principles. To create a world outside of our mind and to create the world within our mind. It's all the same thing. The way we experience the outside is via the inside. And we will be pointing people in a direction of the opposite direction to where we usually look for the reason why we feel like we do, or the reason why the world looks like it does. We'll be pointing people in a completely opposite direction to what it looks like. And we'll be pointing it, as the Buddhists have said for millennia, look within. Go back inside. Turn around, see how this works, see how reality works, and your answers will start to be your questions will start to be answered. Or perhaps your answers might start to be questioned.
Is this making sense to people?
Probably not just
questions.
Let's continue.
Consciousness is something you said when you were discussing science and religion. Right? I don't know why, but I've always brought up with the fear of arguing or doubting or not believing in religion because it's indoctrinated from an early age. And then suddenly all this stuff comes out that's really, none of it, an awful lot of it was so wrong, but you were frightened to question it. Science has come along and waved the flag and gone, no, it's complete nonsense. That, at what point do you basically take it on board yourself to go, take a pace back from both of them and go, what is real?
Good question.
That's the question, because it's, although part of me realizes that if I eat fish on a Friday, I'm not going to, if I don't eat fish on a Friday, I'm not going to hell. I know that's nonsense now. But up until the age of 9, you were going to hell. But you laugh, I'm being serious. And that's what it meant. So now suddenly after 9, 10, you suddenly think, and then there's reasons for it and science and blah, blah, blah. Well, at what point at the right old age do you think, right, you've got religion, you've got science. and let's be honest, they both lied, where do you go from there?
It's a beautiful question, that, Danny. Beautiful question. And hopefully we'll try and answer that question.
I didn't mean it to put you on the spot.
No, it's no, absolutely not. Hopefully we will try and answer that question. But at the same time, we don't want people to believe anything that we say. This isn't about us being experts, because we're not experts. We are fully aware that we're literally scratching the surface of something. We cannot be an expert in it. We can share with you now what we understand. It's not for us to change anybody's beliefs. People are entitled to beliefs. I have beliefs. I hold them a lot lighter than what I used to. And that's a beautiful question. What is real?
I think one of the things I really got when I came across this was that I'd spent years in therapy and counselling for anxiety, depression, shyness, eating disorders, and I'd been told so many different things I didn't really know what to believe anymore, and I didn't trust my own mind. And I remember coming away feeling like I'd been introduced to my best teacher, and I didn't realise that was going to be within me. And I think we're taught to look outside for the answers, and we're taught to believe in other people's beliefs. And I think this is getting us back in touch with the part of us that does know what truth is. And I think that's been a really nice starting point. And it's opened me up to insight and helped me in life. And I think one of the things that you start to realise is that we all think differently. There's different beliefs, there's different ideas, there's all this difference in the world and different ways of being, but there's something that's the same, and that's how it's created. And I think the only conversation we're having is how it's created, not whether what's created is right or wrong. But I do feel like people often call it almost like having a North Star, like suddenly you have something to look to. Like, I feel like I feel because I think like I think. They act like they act because they think like they think, and that looks true and real to them. So it kind of guides us to what is true, and that is the fact of life. And it shows us that everything else after that point, we're all going to have personal opinions about. And some people think it's right, some people think it's wrong. But I think to know that there's something within all of us that can live and navigate life for ourselves, that we know what's right for us. And it's nice to not feel like we have to sit there and sort out everyone else's lives or tell them what's right or wrong or true or false. But when they start to see the nature of life, the nature of themselves, they start to answer their own questions and also get to the point where you can say, I have no idea, like everything doesn't have to be answered. I don't know everything, and I thought the more I learned about this, the more I'd know, but it feels the more I learn, the more I don't know. But it's nice to have something reliable and constant and dependable. And I think that's what I loved, because I had so much belief about who I was, and I didn't realise what belief was made of. And it just, someone pointing out to me that everything you believe to be true has come from the power of thought. The power of thought is a word to describe something that really I have no understanding of. But what you've created, this personality, isn't true. It's a creation, and we're living in this constant, infinite potential for recreation. And I remember just walking away thinking, I wanted to play in life a bit and recreate. Who am I? Who am I if I'm not the shyness? Who am I without depression? Where do those things exist? What are they in the realm of? And I think we can get so. One of the words you've been using a lot recently is this word mesmerised. We get mesmerised by our creations, and the good ones, the bad ones, and we don't realise they're creations. And we've been taught that some of those creations are terrible and we need to work on them or change them, and we're going to suffer them. And there's other characteristics about ourselves that we've said, you know, they're good things and we should hold on to them. But to know that all of them are potentials in an infinite potential of ways of being, but there is something constant creating that. And we do our best to talk to it and point to it and share insights that we've had around it. But I know that my insights have been very different from your insights. And some of the talks that we do, and then we maybe ask people, what have you seen? It's things that have never occurred to me, because the insight comes from within us, like in inner sight. And that's something I believe everyone has access to. Like,
well, if we didn't, we simply wouldn't learn.
I remember saying, it wasn't any of these guys, but when we were in South Africa, we said to a group of teenagers, they're like, well, this Sydney Banks, how did he know all this stuff if he hadn't read books? And we like looked at them for a moment, like, how do you think all this information and knowledge got into books in the first place?
And you know that they're thinking Google. You know that they're...
Well, it was the cutest thing, because you saw them suddenly consider that. Where has knowledge come from? It wasn't in this world, we didn't know about it, and then someone has insight, and then it's here, and it's created, and we're constantly, you just look at the last 100 years with technology and things that we've done, they were not possible. They weren't in the realm of the material.
Awareness, yeah.
But the potential for them's always been there. And I think we've become so reliant on other people's ideas and wisdom, and there's stuff to be learned there, and it's incredible, some of the things we've created, but we've forgotten that we have within us that same power. Like we talk to the kids about, you've got superpower. You have this superpower within you to create a reality. And as we're kids, we play with it and we create all kinds of fun characters. But as we get older, we think we've moved to something else, and we create hell for ourselves. And we think that we are victim of the world or life or our past. And it has been fascinating getting to travel all around the world and meet people from all walks of life, and see that it's not about having money or not having money. It's about our relationship to that. And there's people that seemingly have everything who are happy, seemingly have everything who are unhappy, people that seemingly have nothing who are happy, and people seemingly have nothing who are unhappy. So it isn't about anything in the world of form that creates our feeling. And I think we've been taught to look there and to know that peace exists within us right now, mental health exists within us right now, but we learn dis-ease, we move far away from who we are, but we're only moving far away within thought. So it's not like because we've moved so far away, we have to turn around and walk back as far as we've gone. I came across this at 23, I didn't have to sort of travel back 23 years or anything. It's instant. New thought, new reality. New thought, new world.
It's not bound by space, it's not bound by time, and it's not bound by matter. It doesn't exist in the world that we are so used to, does thought or consciousness. It is energetic, it's spiritual, it exists in the moment. It never leaves the moment. The moment being the only thing that ever actually exists. Now doesn't ever go anywhere. The clock hand changes, but now never goes anywhere. The earth circumnavigates the sun, but now never goes anywhere. And so thought and consciousness are never experienced outside of this moment. Even when it looks like the past is having a detrimental effect on us now, that's only by a thought now. Past doesn't exist outside of our mind, neither does the future. These are all kind of illusions of the mind. These illusions create the reality that we live in.
I think we're taught that change takes time, and I definitely believe that. And to see people have a new experience in any moment, and we got to work in an eating disorder clinic in Vietnam, and we'd been told, we work with the staff, and we've been told about these inpatients. So some of them been there 2 or 3 years. But then we got to go to their Christmas party, and they all took on characters, and they were basically their therapists. They were acting as their therapists. So it was hilarious, and you just saw.
It was quite racist at times.
A little bit. But you just saw them being totally well, totally present, laughing, and it's like, in that moment, where is your mental disease? And I think we've been told that we carry stuff, and we're told that we're this and we're that, but we're not told that we only ever get to experience thought in this moment. So we can bring to life something that's happened to us and feel it now. We can bring to life something that may happen in the future and feel it now. But all of the labels that were given to me were based in this idea that I had this certain type of thinking, but I wasn't always in that type of thinking. So was that label kind of necessary in those times when I wasn't thinking it? So you start to see that we've been led to believe that we can almost box ourselves as these type of people, but we are momentary beings. Like there was times during that which I used to talk about as the worst time in my life. There was times when I was absolutely burst out laughing, or with friends, or with people that I loved or felt comfortable with. That you often speak about watching movies where you just be laughing your head off, and then as soon as it finished, what was I worrying about? Back into depression.
That's what I was thinking about. Yeah.
But I think we kind of spread it out. We're like, no, we're these kind of people. And it's nice to know that change happens in a moment, because it's happening in every moment. Regardless of whether we say we're someone who is depressed or anxious, there's moments when we're not. And the only thing we have is the moment. So you start to see that we're not defined or bound by time or anything. We're not limited. And I think it can feel at times that we're limited. And I know that I would, at some point when I was learning about this, I was like, 100%, I believe this to be true. It's totally 100% resonates and makes sense to me. But I get caught up all the time. Like, it's not that you learn this and then you're like, oh, nothing can affect me outside. It's all in my mind. But you have a lightness about it, and a respect and a humility and compassion for yourself. Like, these principles create reality for us to look real. And, you know, if somebody, we always use this example, but if someone cuts you up in traffic, it looks like that's why you feel pissed off. But actually there's times when that's happened and you've been like, whatever. You start to see that the same thing can happen to us and we react differently. What is the variable? What is the thing that creates our feeling about it? And you'll always come back to thought. And maybe when we're in a really good mood, nothing seems to affect us and things aren't annoying. If we're in a bad mood, everything's annoying, everyone's annoying. And it's nice to start to see that nothing in the world has to change for our experience to change, ever. And we'll all have had examples of that in our own life. And I always say with this, I love that it's self-proving. It's not you have to take on someone else's idea or belief or faith in it. You'll go away and you start to notice in your own life where this shows up. And some of it you just act differently, when normally you'd be like this and actually you act like this, or you do go down but then you come out a bit quicker. And I think to have something that's self-proving and reliable and within us, and you don't have to practice anything or remember anything. Even what we're speaking about tonight, it's pointing to something that's already within us, that we already know. And I think that's the teacher. And I've loved having people in my life that keep pointing me back and reminding me. We sometimes have conversations around this, but the teacher is life. The teacher is with us all the time, and it never leaves us.
Yeah, we are that. It's some people call it realigning yourself with your true self. Some people call it your true self. And then people go, well, all right, then who is this true self? It's a beautiful thing to ponder. But to me, it's what we are without all the concepts of who we think we are. And when you get back to that, you could say it's almost like a blank canvas. And this is one of the things I spoke to Gav about. Something when I was speaking to Gav once, it occurred to me, it's like when we're born, we're a blank canvas. We're born as a blank canvas of consciousness, born of this universal mind with this ability to be tapped into all knowledge. We are literally tapped into a source of all knowledge, the power of thought. And as we start to go through life, we start painting. So our canvas for the painting is consciousness, and our paint is the power of thought. And with the blank canvas of consciousness and this paint of thought, we literally paint a reality that we experience that looks real. And we paint and we paint and we paint happy and we paint sad and we paint this and we paint that. And throughout our lives, we paint. And as we get into like school, then we start painting more serious. And then we start painting the future and how the future needs to look. And we forget that we're painting as kids. We know we're painting. We play with thought when we're kids. Anybody who's got kids, Ed, you know, and Charlotte and all the other mothers and fathers here, they know. You watch your kids. They use this power of thought to create realities that look complete and utter nonsense to us. But to the kid, it looks so real. they live in this kind of this dreamland of fairies and whatever, and I am this and I am that. And they're excited by life. They're excited because they are this power of creation, and they use it wisely. They use it for fun. And then as we start getting older, we start painting serious. Because life, it's a serious thing, is life. Life's serious. Got to have your shit together. Got to have your shit together. You've got to be able to earn money, because if you don't earn money, you won't be able to afford a house. And if you don't afford a house, fucking hell, you're going to be knackered. You're going to end up on the street. You're going to be a smackhead. You're going to blah, blah, blah. Take on all these ideas of, you start painting all these ideas of what life needs to look like, and then we start striving for the future. Or we start dwelling on our past paintings that were so beautiful that we could use this art to create absolute masterpieces of beauty, but now all I can paint is darkness. We use this power to create a reality. And we get so lost. And we get so lost, and we start seeing therapists, and the therapists will say to us, right, what you need to do is you need to go through your paintings. Find out which one of those paintings was the one that fucked you up. Where was it? So we start getting the rubber out, and we start going back through all these paintings, start looking for it. Looking for the thing that took us away from this beautiful being that was so happy and light-hearted and free. And we keep rubbing, and we keep rubbing, and we go back 10, 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, might be 40 years, 50 years. We can't find it. And then we find that all we're left with is this shitty blank canvas and these paints. And we look at it and go, well, it's not here. And we don't realize that is it. That is it right there. Everything that we are looking for was not a painting, but it was the canvas and the paints. Everything that we are looking for is what we already are. We are the painter on the canvas of our life. We literally paint a reality within our mind. We create the reality of how the world looks to us, how we look within our mind. Reality doesn't exist out there. That's a world of matter. That's a world of happenings. That's not the reality of the situation, the one we experience. The one we experience is the world that we think about. How we think about the world is how it shows up. And it's really simple to prove that this point, that reality is an experience. Right now, we're all sat in our own reality experiencing this talk. There is no two people experiencing the same reality. If the reality of this talk was Jenny and I talking and giving an experience to people, everybody would experience it the same. But if we were to do a scorecard at the end of it, we'd get 15, however many people, different scores. We'd get 15 different responses, because there's 15 different realities looking back at us, and then there's more on the computer. The reality we live in is a psychological experience. And this is what we're born with. We're born with the ability to create reality. We are born with the ability to create the reality that we perceive in every single moment. And that doesn't leave us. We never step out of it. You can never step out of our mind. You can never step out of consciousness, and you can never step out of thought. We all live in separate realities. And I know that my reality is so convincingly true and real, as I know Jenny's is, and as I know my dog's is. Rusty's reality is so convincingly real to him, as I know everybody's is. We get so lost in our own minds that we forget what we used to know when we were a kid, was that we can use this power of thought to dream up reality, to dream up the way the world looks to us, to dream up the way we look. We forget that. We forget that we're the dreamer. And we then start to believe that there is a world of consequence and a world of happenings that are dictating how we feel. There are things in the world, there are people in the world, there is a future, there is a past. And all these things kind of crowd up on top of us and they create hell. I can't escape this hell because how the fuck am I going to get away from the past? How can I get away from the past? I did it. I did that. That happened to me. I can't escape that. I'm going to have to live with this forever because of what happened. We're taught that as well. But it's an amazing thing that we only ever get to experience that when we're thinking about it. Where does that past exist, truly? Can we jump on the 555 and go back to yesterday? Or can we fly on a plane to tomorrow? Can we run to 1 hour's time ahead? Or can we jump back to the last 5 minutes? No. But we can with our mind. We can travel through time backwards and forwards as much as we want, and we do this all the time. We time travel in the spiritual, we time travel in the formless. And this is what we do all day. We're forever living in the future, thinking about the past. We find ourselves present very, very little of the time. Because we're so busy-minded. And this isn't a judgment. This is no judgment thing. This isn't about quieting our mind. Now we need to quieten our mind, so let's sit down and quieten our mind. Because the moment we start trying to quieten our mind, we go straight to our intellect, which is a load of thought, which is a busy mind. A quiet mind is just something that happens to people. It happens to us all the time. But as we start to see this, as we start to see what the Buddhists are pointing to, turn around and look within. You want to know why the world looks to you like it does. You want to know why the world feels like it does. You want to know why somebody thinks that's absolutely appalling and the next person is absolutely commending it. You need look no further than the fact that they live in their own world. Literally. People speak about that as though it's a bad thing. Oh, he lives in his own world, he does. Yeah. Come back to the real world. I live in the real world. Whose real world? Your real world or my real? Your real world or your real world? It's like, whose real world are we talking about? Because nobody lives in the real world. My reality is not the real reality. My reality is a potential. My reality is a potential within my own reality. The way I think about somebody can change in a moment. And the moment my opinion or my thinking changes, two words describing the same thing, they appear different. And I think we've all experienced that, where I'm not too sure about this person. Not too sure about, I don't know, I get a bit of a bad vibe from this person. 10 minutes later, we're like, actually, I quite like you. You're all right. You're all right. The person hasn't changed. What's changed? Our thoughts changed. To start to get a sense of this is to start to get a sense of the nature of reality. To start to get a sense of the nature of reality is to do something so amazing for a human being. It changes lives. When an individual suddenly realizes that the future cannot create stress, it doesn't exist. What's creating this feeling of stress? It's thought. Stress is thought. Stress is thought, creating a feeling. When people realize that the past cannot affect them in any way because it doesn't exist. What happened, happened. But it doesn't exist now outside of our mind. In order for it to affect us now, we have to be thinking about it. It's funny because we often say this. People say, do you miss your family when you're abroad? And we're like, well, we weren't. But now we're thinking about it. Yeah, Yeah, I do miss the family now. Until we're thinking about it, we don't experience it. Because the experience is the reality that we live in. And this reality is not out there, it's within. Consciousness and thought create the way the world looks to all of us. And we're all doing this. We're all doing it. There's so many beautiful things that come from it. It's like all of a sudden, judgment becomes a really silly thing. You start to find yourself, every now and again, we'll find ourselves getting judgmental of somebody or something, and it's like, or each other, or ourselves, for that matter. And sooner or later, it dawns on you, this is nonsense. You are judging somebody else's experience from your experience. Their reality looks very, very real to them. No wonder they did what they did. Of course they did what they did, because thought came to them that they felt, and it looked real. So of course they behave like they behave. It's like compassion is suddenly born. And one of the even more beautiful things of that is forgiveness. To forgive. There was a girl in South Africa who Jen and I did some work with, and she was in a group like this, in a township. And forgive me if anybody's heard this story, but she came, she was like quite feisty little gangster, like in braids, and she was really cool, danced everywhere, really happy little thing. Like, you wouldn't cross her, she was quite feisty. And I remember the day two, well, we sat down at the beginning, we said, anybody have any insights, anything they want to share? And all the mates were like, nudging, go on, say it. She's like, no, I'm not saying. So at break time, I said, will you tell me? And she said, okay. She said, a couple of days ago, my neighbour came around and stole my phone. So when she left, she had noticed my phone had gone. And she said, so I knew she'd taken it. So I stormed right round there, braid on her door. She said, I just walked straight in. She said, I walked through the house, where's my phone? She said, I found a brother fixing my phone. She said, it wasn't broken when I had it. She said, they'd broken it in between her house and my house. And she said, with that, her husband, this lady's husband came through, and she said, and he didn't have a problem that she stole my phone. She said, so I provoked him, I pushed him, and I goaded him. I wanted him to beat me. I wanted him to beat me so I could go to the police for two things, and they would have to take this seriously. She said, I just wanted him to beat me. She said, I was so rude to him. She said, I hated them. And she said, they wouldn't give me my phone. She said, I walked out, slammed the door. And she said, the next day, she said, I came to your court. She said, it made no sense. She said, it made no sense whatsoever. She said, but when I went home, she said, I got up out of my seat and I walked down to my neighbours. She said, and I knocked on the door. And she said, I apologised to them for the way I spoke to them. And she said, I said to them, I will take my phone back now, and you will not fix it. I will fix this phone. And she said, with that, then they went and got the phone. They gave her it back, and she said, I want to forget about this. She said, I'm sorry for how I spoke to you. She said, we're neighbours. One day I will need you, and you will need me. And with that, she said, I left. And I was like, wow. That's amazing. I said, do you not feel like you mugged yourself in any way? You know, they did steal your phone. Do you not feel like you mugged you in any way? You mugged them. They've been mugged off in any way. And she said, no. She said, the weight of the world has come off my shoulders. Through seeing the nature of separate reality, she found forgiveness. And it was such a beautiful story. And then I walked outside and I found you and Jill sat down eating your lunch, and just as I sat down, this other lady who was on one of our first programs in this township came wandering up. She was crying her eyes out. Are you okay? She said, no. She said, I've just found out my brother-in-law's been shot dead. I said, what do you mean? She said, he's a taxi driver, pulled up at the wrong taxi rank. Somebody just leant through and shot him dead. When did you find out? She said, just this moment. And it was in that moment that this girl's story took on a whole new kind of level, because The township is a violent place. Life's cheap. And her realization, her act of kindness, her act of forgiveness killed that situation dead. Stopped it. Completely stopped it dead. Just stopped it. She doesn't need to go to bed now worrying about revenge, what they're going to do, who they're going to get. She doesn't have to build up a plot and what she's going to do, and it all gets out of hand. And everybody lives this tense life of worry about what the next person's going to do and getting one over each other. It was stopped dead. This person just found forgiveness, and she found it by realizing how we're all living in a separate reality, and we do what we do because we think like we think, and it makes sense to us in that moment. It's a very humbling thing to see the innocence in that. Everything that people do to us is done because it makes sense to them, given what they're thinking, given where they're at. And everything we do to people makes sense to us, given what we're thinking and given where we're at. Because the reality of the situation does not exist out there, it exists in our mind. We feel that. We feel what we think. Yeah, should we have a 10-minute break?
Is there any questions?
That goes to people online as well.
How long, when you realise that trees are kind of like, you know, conscious, how long ago was that then? Did you realise?
I think personally I realised it when I realised what reality was.
Yeah.
But I think over time I grew in deeper appreciation of this fact. And the way I kind of describe it now is that, so you could say, you can see that a tree is conscious. I mean, they drop the leaves in autumn, they grow the leaves back in spring. They are aware of the seasonal change. They're aware of each other. They're aware of where the sun is. If the lads here who've done tree felling, when you fell a tree that grows right next to each other, you will find that this tree has no branches on this inside. It only has branches where is useful to it. It is a conscious thinking being. But we've got so tied up in the realms of thought being like a consequence or a product of brain. And I remember reading one of my forestry magazines when they were talking about insects attacking.
They know even what caterpillar, by the saliva that it leaves, right, which caterpillar's on it, so they can release enzymes that other beetles smell and come and eat the caterpillars. That's right.
It's an incredibly intelligent being,
yeah,
or system is a tree. Yes. And when you start seeing this, to be able to react in the moment is a conscious thought.
Isn't it? So, yeah, it's just not what we think is conscious. It's just like different.
That's right. And I remember reading something about this in one of my forestry magazines, and them being perplexed by this point. They were saying how we know trees think, but we do not understand how, because they do not have a brain. And it was when I woke up to this and I realized, well, thought is a psychological principle. And the word psychological, this is one of the things I really love what Sydney Banks used to say, psychological, the logic of the psyche. But he said, if you look at the origin of the word psyche, it's the soul. So you've got psychological, logic of the psyche, logic of the soul. You've actually got the fact that this psychological happening is a spiritual thing. It's a formless, infinite potential thing. It doesn't exist within the realms of what we understand with our intellect, yet we have the intellect because of it. Everything is a consequence of this psychological, this logical psyche, logic of the psyche. And what kind of really hit me was how, when we talk about consciousness, consciousness is awareness. And awareness is an experience. And experience equals reality. So a tree, being a conscious being, experiences a reality. I have no idea what a tree's reality looks like, and I often say this, I have no idea what a tree's reality looks like, but I have no idea what Jenny's reality looks like, and I live with her 24/7. And sometimes I'm absolutely perplexed at her reality. And it's like, what the hell are you, why would that be so important? But to you it's so important. Then you look at me and go, why would you get so pissed off about that? I'm like, because I think. Yes, brother.
It's not only trees, it's all living things, which is why I can't even put a weed out the garden.
I know.
It really hurts me to. We've got a patio outside and it's full of all these little pansies, but flowers and dandelions and everything else that's growing there now. You can hardly see the stalks, but I can't. I just can't.
Succession's taking over, isn't it?
To blow up because I cry and I can cry for carrots. You know, when you're grating a carrot, I'm thinking, what's this poor carrot feeling? So but that's my reality.
This is it. It's not about, we're not telling anybody how to, you know, we're not telling anybody how to live. This isn't about anybody.
Oh, yeah.
This.
One of the people that has come over to do a course with us, she texted us, she goes, I've now got a lodger. I'm like, who's that? She said, it's a cockroach. She's like, I cannot kill it. And she's had it for weeks.
Yeah. She said it actually got quite fond of it the other day. She said, I watched it scuttle out the bathroom where it normally lives, and it scuttled off down the hallway. And she said, I woke up the next morning, and it was back in the bathroom. But it is like we say, we're not telling anybody how to live. We're not saying don't pull up the weeds. We're just pointing out how life, we're just talking about how life works. We're simply talking about how life works. And as we start to get a sense of it, our feelings start to make sense, which is such a big thing for people because we live in such a feeling state. You know, what is depression? Well, depression's a long period of feeling like shit, and we call that depression. But why do we feel like we feel? I know from my depression, my experience of my diagnosis of depression that I would have for the rest of my life, that during those periods of feeling like shit for a long time, my thinking was terrible. And we always kind of get the impression that, and psychiatrists will tell us that a feeling creates thought. Well, no. A feeling cannot create the ethereal power of thought, but the ethereal power of thought can create feeling. We've got that 180 degrees wrong in psychiatry. And then sadly, it really does take people in the wrong direction. When people think that they are their thoughts, when people think that they are their feelings, rather realizing that they're the dreamer of the reality that they're experiencing. Again, that's something mystics have spoken about for millennia, that life is a divine dream. Life is a divine dream. Reality is a state of consciousness. And every single one of us, being a living being, are experiencing this fact. Every single one of us is experiencing the world of confusion, of sadness, of gratitude, of pleasure, of pain, via the power of thought and consciousness. We experience all our feelings. We make up what our feelings actually mean. We label feelings bad, as though some feelings are right and some feelings are wrong. Every single feeling is perfect. There are no right and wrong feelings. Just bear with me 1 second, Crystal. A feeling is a consequence of thought. It's perfect. To feel angry is not a wrong feeling. It's a consequence of what we're thinking. To feel sad is not a wrong feeling. It's a perfect feeling, given what we're thinking. And thought takes on so many different forms, and it just happens. It's happening all the time that we forget that this is what's happening. And so we attribute what we feel to objects. I feel like I feel because I'm looking at not enough zeros in the bank account. Or I feel like I feel because that person over there is a bit of an asshole. I feel like I feel because it's raining. I feel like I feel because of that happened last week. I feel like I feel because of you. I feel like I feel because of work. I feel like I feel because of the traffic. We blame everything for the way we feel, as though all those things have the ability to kind of give off a feeling, give off a feeling, give off a feeling. But it's really interesting when you consider the fact that if that was true, then surely we would all feel the same. Given a situation, we would all feel the same, we would all react the same, but we really don't, do we? There are people who go to the same jobs that we do, and they enjoy the work, when I hated it. You know, there are people who really loved it and wanted to get so involved, and I just sat there, I was like, this is shit, I don't want to do it anymore. It's like in traffic jams, I can go through all kinds of experience from, Google this, how long is it? And it's like, sat there quietly, just minding my own business, just observing the traffic, looking at a bird or something. Now I'm in a different experience. Then I'm like, oh, it's quite nice just to sit still just for 5 minutes, actually, it's quite nice. I go through a range of experiences in the same traffic jam. I feel different throughout each one. And as my experience changes, so the traffic jam takes on a different appearance. It appears different. Because the traffic jam experience is not created by the traffic jam, that's a happening. What is creating is the power of thought and consciousness. It creates the reality that we live in, creates the reality that we experience. And this is what life is. It's an experience. It is all experience from birth till death. That's what life is. It's experience, whether it's joy or pain, sorrow or gladness. It's all experience. And all experience is a state of consciousness brought into a feeling state by a thought. To start seeing that, to start getting a sense of it. I mean, this might make no sense to people at the moment. But as we start to become aware of that, it, like I said earlier, it can create cataclysmic changes to our ego. Our ego being who we think we are, what we think we are, what we think this world is. Our belief system is our ego. Our ego is a thought. Our ego isn't a thing. Our personality changes all the time. Sometimes we're all right, sometimes we're pissed off, sometimes not. We're human beings. We all experience that. But we're not our feelings. We're not our thoughts. So something I often say, I nearly said 78 just then. I am 39 next week. And I've had an awful lot of thoughts throughout my 39 years. So if I am my thoughts, which one am I? Which group am I? Am I any of them? Or am I the dreamer? Am I the thinker? You start to realize that we're not what we think we are the thinker. What we think is an expression of thought that we believe and we hold on to and we make it ours. This thought's me. But we were never that thought. We were never that feeling. We were the dreamer. Crystal, what were you going to say?
Yeah, that's mainly what you were just saying there, the thinker, we are the thinker. I was going to say about that, we are the thinker, but rather than believing all our beliefs about ourselves, the world and other people, be the observer of your thoughts, just observe them kind of thing, you know, like observe them, you don't have to act on them or whatever, but be the observer behind thoughts.
We already are.
Yeah.
We can't not be the observer of thought.
Yeah.
We are the observer of thought.
Yeah, so it's just observing it, letting you see.
That's exactly what reality is.
Because we're the thinker,
That is exactly what it is. We are the observer of our thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
it's great. It's funny, you get to play with it a bit more.
Isn't that nice?
Mm.
Isn't that nice when all of a sudden, but I forget who it was, Dave will probably tell us, who was it who said that the definition of genius is to take a childlike state into adulthood?
Good question, I don't know. I've heard it, but I don't know.
Yeah, it was
Sorry to let you down.
You know, does anybody else?
Take me off the pedestal now.
Oh, I'll leave you there. There's a quote by one of the old mystics, could have been Socrates or somebody like that, and he said, the definition of a genius is somebody who carries a childlike state into adulthood. And I mean, to me, if you'd asked me that 6 years ago what that means, I'd be like, well, I don't want to play with a stick. You know, I don't know. Well, that's not true, is it, actually? You know what I mean? It's like, it's not about playing like a child, but it's coming back to that magic of life.
And that's what Jesus said. If you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must become as a little child. The same
Absolutely.
thing. But
Exactly. And then people. I was listening to a thing on. It was the Lost Chapters of Thomas on YouTube, which was edited out of the New Testament. It was supposed to be the actual words of Jesus. Yeah, that was one of the things that was spoken about. To enter the kingdom of heaven, you must become like the child. And again, he's not talking about becoming a childish person, but childish in the sense of realizing that we don't know and finding intrigue in life. Like finding that intrigue and that magic back again in life, where you suddenly find yourself in a state of, what the hell is all this?
Finding happiness in the unknown.
Finding happiness in the unknown.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, it's suddenly finding that we think that we know things, which is our problem. We think we know what we are. We think we know who we are. I am a depressive person. This is just who I am. I am a miserable bastard. But to suddenly realize that's a thought. That's a thought I actually thought a long time ago, and I've carried on believing it. And to suddenly come out of that and go, well, if I'm not that, then what am I? We start finding that childlike state again, that openness, that thing that doesn't know it all, the thing that's closer to truth than any adult with all their wisdom, with all their ideas, with all their great ideas and beliefs. Because to be closer to truth is to realize that you don't know. We believe. We believe stuff. And I think when people find that, they enter the kingdom of heaven, not the kingdom of heaven being somewhere that is after death, somewhere we go to for living, being a good person, but the kingdom of heaven. Another thing that Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is all over the face of planet Earth, but humanity cannot see it. He said, this person said, where is this kingdom of heaven, Jesus? Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is all over the earth, but humanity cannot see it. It's everything. It's everything.
And it's within.
And it's within.
It was nice hanging out with them.
And so to enter the kingdom of heaven is to find within ourselves this place of peace and happiness and love and joy. That's the kingdom of heaven. And then you've got the other extreme, which is hell. And rather than, this is another thing that Sydney Banks said, heaven and hell aren't places you go after death. Heaven and hell are states of being now. We either live in heaven or we live in hell. And they're feeling states. I don't think there'll be one person in this room who hasn't experienced hell at some point in their life. And there won't be one person in this room who hasn't experienced heaven. There was such beautiful, metaphorical, wise tales spoken by such wise people in the past and present, apart from people took on beliefs and created ideas and beliefs. With this power, they created ideas and beliefs about what each of it meant. We create concepts. And that's what we think we are is a concept. It's not true.
I was just going to say, it's that presence that kids can often have. Because we were hanging out with my friend and her 15-month-old baby, and we were all chatting away, and then a bird went over making quite a lot of noise, and he just stopped and was like stood there and was just still listening, and you could see he was just, I was like, wow, look at him. And you're like, yeah, he doesn't know what the bird is. He's still learning. And it really, we just watched him for a while. He was in the garden and like looking at weeds, and he was just so intrigued and so present in the moment. And we realised that we get a sense of knowing stuff, and we stop being amazed by it. Like my nephew apparently walked into my dad last week, and he's 6 years old, and he said, "Granddad, terrible. We don't know what we don't know. I think life's hilarious, and then just walked out. And my dad said he was just sort of sat there. But I just thought it was such a
The trouble is, we don't know what we don't know.
I thought it was such a good thing for him to have seen. It's like but he kind of saw it as funny. And then someone was speaking to one of the guys from the refugee centre. He said this amazing philosopher from the past. I don't remember which century it was that he was talking about. But one of the things that he said was that we don't know. That we know.
The only thing I know
is that I know that I know that I know that I don't know. And I think watching my friends,
Confucius.
yeah, I think it's like 14th, 15th century. But watching like small kids get present in life, like most of the time, like they can have tantrums, they can be terribly upset, they can be completely present and still, they can get lost in things. But I think we lose that sense of presence because we get so busy-minded and so caught up in what we think we know, what we need to do, how life should look, how we should look, and we miss what's already here in the moment. And then we have all these ideas about how to get present, and we don't realise how much that can busy our mind more. The presence is what happens when stuff comes off our minds, not when we put more on it. And I hadn't realised how much of the time I was trying to fix my own thinking, so just getting more and more and more. Whereas
that whole I'll be all right when they've left work. I'll be all right when I get another job. I'll be all right when I'm out of this traffic jam. I'll be all right when I've got some money. I'll be all right when. And all along, we've always been all right. And yet we think that our all rightness depends on a circumstance. All rightness does not exist outside in the world. All rightness is thought. The only thing that creates the illusion of not being all right is the way we think about things, how we perceive the world. Because all rightness and not all rightness is not out there. It's a state of being. It's heaven and hell. And we keep on looking outside. I'll be all right when. Big thing. People say that all the time.
Yeah. You know when Sid says that you're just one thought away? Does he mean like, because I kept thinking, so I'm going to get this massive thought and that's it, I've got it. But does he not, does he just mean you're just always one thought away?
He says you're one thought away from happiness and you're one thought away from sadness in every single moment. Because happiness and sadness are thought. They're the feeling states created by a thought.
I've just got it now. I was just expecting this, all of a sudden, you know, because he had that thunderbolt and that was it, and I've been waiting for that. Why didn't you tell me that?
It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. You'll see stuff and it'll be like, holy shit, because this is so simple. You realise that we have made life, because we have this amazing capacity for thought, we've just completely bypassed it and made it such a complex thing, that this psychology thing, such a complex thing. Theory this, theory that, theory this, theory that. I think there's 400 different modalities of psychology. And they're all basically based on Freud. And like even CBT, which is like trying to work, they have this awareness of thought creates feeling, but then they're like, well, let's change your thoughts. It's like all of a sudden, no, you're still not right. But I know that the absolute freedom that I was looking for existed when I realized I don't need to change thought. I can spend my life chasing around after my thoughts, or I can just live.
You saw that as soon as you've thought it, it's in the past. That's one of the things you said.
Yeah,
you can't change what's already happened.
The moment you've thought it, it's immediately in the past. How can you change it? How can you change it? It's immediately in the past. Eh?
We think too much, that's the problem, isn't it?
We get very busy-minded, very distracted.
Instead of focusing on the now, we're just thinking too much about what effect things may have. And really, that's affecting what we're actually doing in life, isn't it?
Yeah. You know,
just trying to live, really, aren't we?
It's really nice when you time travel in your mind, what you were saying about going for the past and the future, and then you're actually doing something, you're talking to someone in town, or you're having a coffee or whatever, or you're washing up, whatever you're doing in that moment, and you're like, actually, yeah, I'm feeling the washing up dishes, I'm feeling the water on my hands, you know, it's kind of like, I'm there in that moment with my friend, having a coffee, yeah, I'm listening, I'm eye contact, I'm feeling it. You know, it's like Yeah, it's great when you just come back to the present.
The present isn't a doing though.
No.
You can't do being present.
No, it's just there,
Presence is what is left when we're not really thinking, when we're just sat, or we're just doing something, we're just doing whatever, and we just find ourselves here now. You know, people spend their life, I must be present, okay, be present. We're not being present, we're totally occupying our mind.
You're trying to sell it though, aren't you? Like, you know, like being the present moment. Oh, it's like Urquhart told. You're trying to make a load of money off it. Like, you've got to be in your inner body and your present moment. It's impossible, isn't it?
Presence is what is left. The now never goes anywhere. You know, you can't not be in the now. We are, what is it Jamie Smart said? Where are your hands? On the end of my arm. When are your hands? Now. It's like, it never goes anywhere, doesn't it now?
I love music.
But to be able to experience that more in life, it's like, I was just sat down with Gab just now, and he's like, how have you been? It's like, I think I'm all right. How are you doing now? And you're like, oh yeah, I think I'm all right. Yeah. It's like, we spend so much time in reflection, and we think that now, this is now. But it's like, we kind of give now a grace period of like 5-10 minutes possibly. Perhaps today we'll give, now's kind of tomorrow as well, you know. We're not talking about that kind of now. We're talking about this simply, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist anywhere on the face of planet Earth. There is no tomorrow, there is no yesterday, there is just this moment. And the only thing that is ever happening is we're experiencing the power of thought and consciousness in this moment and living the reality that is coming, that's bringing to life as individuals. And I think as people start to see this, it's like you start to see that all thought is the same thing. Good thought, bad thought, right thought, wrong thought. What I think is a wrong thought to the next person can be a totally acceptable thought. That's nothing compared to what I've thought. You know, and I personally, I have all kinds of mental thinking. I have all kinds of mental thinking. Totally illegal thinking, totally immoral thinking, barbaric thinking, destructive thinking, sad thinking, happy thinking, blah, 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 blah. I used to think it meant something about me. I used to think that these thoughts were an indication of the kind of person that I was. I didn't realize I was simply the dreamer. The thought is a thought. To have a terrible thought is exactly the same stuff. Terrible thought is exactly the same stuff as a great thought, happy thought, enlightened thought, suicidal thought. You could say they're all like waves on the water.
The consequences are quite different, aren't they? The thought that you have.
Well, it depends on your relationship to thought. It depends.
Okay, yes. Yeah. If you're conscious or not.
It depends on how aware you are of the nature of thought. Before coming across this, I won't say I acted on every single thought. I did have some awareness that when I'm stood at the top of a high building and my thoughts telling me, go on, jump, do it. It's like I have an awareness, oh no, that's thought, don't do that. But when somebody cut me up, I didn't have awareness of, I feel like I feel because I'm thinking like I'm thinking. So I just act and jump out and go, all hell would break loose. So it's like our behavior depends on our relationships and or you could say our level of understanding or our level of consciousness. Because now when I have all these kind of this thought, it's not that I can stop thoughts. You can't stop a thought coming into your mind. In fact, you're only aware of it once it's happened. The moment it's there, then you're aware of it, or unaware of it. So much thought we're actually unaware of. But to understand that a wave is a consequence of water. Every single wave in a lake is a consequence of the water. It's all water. There is no wave that isn't water. There's no right wave, there's no wrong wave, there's no right water, there's no wrong water, there is just water. all thought is the same. It carries a different feeling and a different experience. There's no right and wrong thoughts. Behavior and action, there are consequences.
Because if a whole nation of people buys into say a communist ideology, 100 million people die, that is a consequence of thought. People acting upon that thought. So it is important to get to have bright thoughts. Otherwise, you have sociopaths.
It's important to have awareness.
And from that awareness, you can then choose your thoughts. You can choose your beliefs. Like you said earlier, you have beliefs. You can choose those beliefs.
It gives you an awful lot more options. As you become aware, as your consciousness rises or as your awareness grows, however you want to describe it, you find more options become available to you. Where in the past, I just did a speed awareness course.
I did one of those last year.
I did very well, actually. I've done very well.
I wasn't able to do that.
Well, you know.
Scotland, they just get fined and that's it.
Is it?
You can't get out.
I was in Birmingham. But one of the things that they speak about is like, don't drive so far up the back end of the car in front. And then they'll go, why do you not want to do that? And somebody will go, because you've got no time to act or move. And they'll be like, yeah, well done, you bloody idiots. You're all here because you're all bloody idiots. And so they say, leave space. Leave space between you and the car in front. And then, yeah. You have to imagine that doesn't happen. And it's like, leave space. And it seems to me like that space between the car in front and ourselves is the space between living life nose to bumper with the outside world, or living nose to bumper with the power of thought. It's like when that space right there is important, because when we have space, we have time to decide where we're going to take this vehicle. All right, they've stopped. Where am I going to go? When we're nose to bumper, we're just straight into it, straight into the problem. But when we have that space, you could say that space is awareness. That space is consciousness. It's like when you have more space, you have more time. It's like you have more options available to you. Where am I going to go? This situation's happened in front of me. Now, where am I going to go with this? Am I actually going to just kick off and react, or am I going to do this? I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just simply explaining that as we start to understand that our reality is created by a thought, we start to see it's an illusion. It's not true. If it was true, we'd never change our mind. But we do change our minds. We meet people and fall in love, and then years later we fall out of love. You know, we meet somebody and we think that that's everything, and then we meet somebody else and we think, no, you're everything. Or we buy a car and we think it's the best car in the world until 6 months later, and it's not. We want another car. I want to move house now. I'm sick of this, blah, blah. If the reality of the situation was what we first think, then we would never change our minds. But as we all know, reality changes. Our experience changes.
And you learn. Because I think when you mentioned that before, when I was a kid, I had terrible thoughts. I used to think I was a bad person. But as I grew, my knowledge of the world sort of grew with it. I now know they were just thoughts, because I never acted upon them, but I thought at the time it was really serious. I was probably only about 5 or 6, but it was really part of my life. It was serious. I didn't like having them thoughts. I never acted upon them, but later on you just realise you're just learning in the world, aren't you? And thought is just something that is new to you, and it's just an experience. That what if I think about this? What if I think about that? Ooh, I shouldn't have thought that. That's horrible. You know what I mean? Probably wasn't anything particular, but at the time, your knowledge of the world isn't very great. So something that's not the norm is not very nice. You can't, I thought I was a bad person for ages. You know what I mean?
Many people do.
And I'd totally forgotten about it till you just mentioned it then. But with knowledge and time, you forget that, and you've more experience of life, and your ability to change from it is there, isn't it?
Yeah. Many people think that what they think is who they are.
Yeah, it's not at all.
I still have terrible thoughts every day.
Yeah,
and don't mean
but you don't act upon it. That's the difference, isn't it?
Yes, and so, and what I'm kind of learning, because I used to like have some shit thought, and then I'd be, oh, damn, you're such a, how could you think that?
Yeah.
You're not from this planet, you're in the animal, you should be in an asylum, whatever, like,
Yeah.
and then it just becomes this,
Yeah.
Otherwise it's like, yeah, oh yes, that's kind of, you know, like, they have the traffic cop, number 642, whatever it is.
Yeah. You know, they come and they go.
Yeah, exactly. We don't really get to choose them.
No, we don't. No.
I think it allows you, when you see that in yourself, that it's just a thought kind of thing, don't need to act upon it. You see that when you see it in yourself truly, you see it in everyone else, everyone and everything. And that's really freeing. Yeah. And it allows you to have more compassion and kindness and understanding for each other and everything else. Because I think that's what will change the world on a global scale, in the sense of happiness and love and contentment.
Full stop.
Full stop. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only thing.
One person at a time. God just says change one person at a time. You love yourself completely, then you love others as well. It's just lovely, isn't it? Isn't it? Just so simple.
It's really simple.
Really? Isn't it? Yeah.
It is lovely. It is really simple. The only way that this world can change is if people think different. The only way, and it's interesting, what was I thinking about the other day? You know, I was saying, when I realised this, it happened in a moment. So I'm like, holy shit, this whole thing is thought. Whole reality is thought. Reality is thought. It's a thought creation. Power of what, I don't even know what thought is. I have no idea. What is it? I have no idea. Why is it? I have no idea. I didn't create it. Human beings didn't create it. It's not one of our inventions that we can lay claim to. Yet it's the ability to create, to invent things. It's the power of creation. There's a word in the Bible for the Creator. And I remember my world, the world, or literally the world, changing in a moment. I remember I used to live in a world of hostility and anger and depression and sadness, and it's a terrible place to live, is this planet. Got all these horrible things happening. Listen to the news. This is terrible. And then when I realized it's all thought, this is all thought, the world, the next moment, looked totally different. It looked brighter. It looked more beautiful. I saw beauty in the world. I met people doing beautiful things. They have always existed. I just never saw them because my awareness, my consciousness was always on negative thinking. But then when my thinking changed, when I suddenly gained more awareness, it was like all of a sudden the world changed and the world was full of beautiful people doing amazing things. And yeah, there's those things going on over there. But do you know what that is? That's people acting out thought. They cannot do that behavior without first feeling the compulsion to do it and then acting on it. But they cannot feel that feeling without first having a thought. And I can see the world's a very innocent place. Human beings are an exceptionally innocent creature that has bigged itself up to the point where it has separated itself from everything else. It's all a thought. It's not separate. It's the same thing. It is nature. It's a creature born of this planet in the same way as a coyote or a rat is. And within our minds, we've created such separation. And this is why we were saying in South Africa, the solution to the South African problem is very simple. People just need to change their minds about how they see each other. And the moment people's thinking changes, they will appear different to one another. And when they start appearing different to one another, they will start moving forward in unison or more cooperative. It's so simple. It is literally that simple. You can throw money at things. You can, until the consciousness of the place changes, the money is worthless. It will just get spent on worthless shite. But as people's mindset changes, then people find more options. There has only ever been one place to look. There only ever will be one place to look. It's interesting, some of the, I don't know if there was a couple of the kids on before who've been working with in South Africa, and they're like, why has nobody told us this before? There's such high medication, psychological medication out there for people, medicating feelings, medicating a feeling. I'm on medication because I feel anxious. We have a feeling, so we think it's a wrong feeling, so we medicate it. And I'm not anti-medication, I'm pro-awareness. I'm pro people understanding that they feel like they feel not because there's something wrong with them, but because they're perfect. We feel anxious because we have anxious thinking. Now, is that really an illness? No. It's actually perfection. Perfect. It's not nice. Admit that. I experienced that. But it's perfect. And given time, one of the things we've observed with these kids, something you just spoke to, Dave, is these kids that are banged on medication from the age of 3 that we've been working with, they never get to learn what a feeling is. They never get to learn how a feeling is not information about the outside world. It's not giving us information about people. A feeling is not telling us about the future or the past. A feeling's not telling us about a person or a this or a that or work or money or anything like that. Stressful feeling is not information about anything other than a reflection of what we're thinking. It's information about what's going on in our own mind. That's what a feeling is. It's a shadow of thought. The two go hand in hand. It's a shadow of thought. Jenny calls it the visible face of thought. You don't always get to see what's run through your mind, but you get to experience it as a feeling, as a reality. And those kids won't get to grow up and learn in the most fundamentally beautifully natural way. We are designed, or we are constructed from such beautiful intelligence. Intelligence that created the entire biome of this planet. It works in such harmony with one another. The whole thing works so beautifully. And we think that the biome of each of ourselves is broken. But it's actually perfect. We've just lived in such misunderstanding. We've lived as though reality exists out there and we are subjected to it. Or reality is the past or the future and we're subjected to it. Rather than realizing that reality exists within each and every living being within ourselves. Fast. Does anybody have any more questions? Question? Oh. So if anybody is interested, Jen and I have freedomthinking.co.uk. We do work with individuals, work with groups, do retreats. If anybody's interested, get in touch. If anybody wants to explore more, we try and do these as often as we can when we're up. But like we haven't been around lately, so this is the first one, but hopefully the next few weeks there'll be one a week one. And the only thing that we ask people to do is just go away and just live life.
I say,
Go away.
wow.
Yeah, just go away. I just want everybody just to piss off. No, we just, the only thing we ask is that we keep yeah.
You do that first.
Yeah. No, really, the only thing that we ask of people is literally just to go away and just go and live. You know, and the thing is about this is it reveals itself when it's ready. Insight, you cannot create the thought that we think that we're looking for. We cannot create insight. Insight is something that just happens, and it happens. Some people wake up bit by bit, bit by bit, bit by bit. Some people wake up really quickly. It makes no odds. There's no right and there's no wrong. But all we ask is that people just go away. Don't try and figure this all out. Don't believe us. But just see if what has been said makes sense. If it feels as though it's something true, just sit with it. You can't figure this out. Figuring it out is one of the things that really holds people back, isn't it? They're trying to figure it out with their intellect. But this isn't an intellectual thing. An intellect is a wave. We're not talking about the waves. We're talking about the lake. We're talking about the water, all thought.
That guy had a question, sorry, did you?
Yes.
Danny.
To go back to that fear, just all through your talk, right? I've smiled and had a quiet chuckle, and when I had those thoughts when I was younger, when my mind was open and not, when I dared to think them, they were right. They actually were the right thoughts. The nonsense, for want of a better word, that's been fed through whatever media every day nonsense, where you're not allowed to ask that question because you look stupid. You're not allowed to ask that question because you go to hell. You're not allowed to ask that question because you're in kneecap. Suddenly, all of that nonsense controls your thoughts, controls what's going in, and the bit of you that dared to think differently to everybody else is gone. And I think if I was to take anything away from here tonight, it would be that go back to the beginning. It is about the paint, it is about the canvas, it's not about the nonsense. And believe me, not believe in yourself, but believe you're entitled to think whatever you want. Right, wrong, indifferent, and when it's gone, it's gone. And no, you're not going to hell. You're not going to, you know what I mean? And there was always that, well, hold on a minute. I got slapped in the face for this at school, right? Hold on a minute. The guy that had the cheeseburger on the Friday and got knocked down on the Saturday, before he went to confession, went to hell. Now the Pope says, and I know you're not on about religion, I'm on about thought. This isn't about,
Please carry on, yeah.
Right. So the question was, when the Pope changed his mind and said, yeah, it's actually all right to have a cheeseburger on a Friday, all those people that had the cheeseburger and got knocked down on the Saturday and didn't get to confession, they still in hell.
Promoted to Burger King.
So that question, that thought, that not doubt, but having the right to ask
that
the
free
question
thinking capacity
was taboo, and you go wrong, bad. And suddenly it isn't. And if I was to take anything away from tonight, it was the think what you want. It's not wrong. Do you know what I mean?
And understanding.
Yeah.
And understand.
Yeah. Or it's okay, go back to being 7, ask the question, you're not going to get slapped anymore, it's all right. That's, I was going to take away something, it would be that.
That's nice, that's really nice. And that whole thing about going back to the beginning, what I love is that the beginning is now. The now is the beginning of the rest of our lives. And just because we've lived our lives up until this point, however we've been, now's the beginning. Now is the beginning of the rest of our lives. And the beautiful thing about the way that reality or life actually works is we're not our past. We're momentary beings. And we can create all kinds of things. We can create beauty and love. It's funny, it seems to be the one thing that's left when all our fears die away. What we're left with, you're left with love, and beauty, and compassion, and understanding.
Beatles were right.
Beatles were onto something. Okay. Thanks, Danny.
I'm sure someone said it before the Beatles.
No.
Hey, separate reality right there.